The rain fell heavily that evening, creating a symphony of pitter-patter against the windshield of David's old but reliable sedan. He was tired after a long day at Horizon Innovations, where he'd worked as a mid-level manager for the past 8 years. His fingers tapped along to the soft rock playing on the radio as he thought about his daughter Mia waiting at home. The 12-year-old would be finishing her homework under the watchful eye of Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor who looked after Mia after school. David Chen had learned to stretch every minute of his day since becoming a single father 5 years ago. Between work presentations and parent-teacher conferences, grocery shopping and bedtime stories, his life was a carefully balanced act. But he wouldn't have it any other way. Mia was his world, his reason for pushing forward each day. Just another 20 minutes and I'll be home, he murmured to himself, squinting through the rain-streaked windshield. The road ahead was mostly empty, winding through a wooded area that separated the business district from the suburbs where he lived. Streetlights were sparse here, making the drive more challenging than usual in the stormy weather. That's when he saw it. A flash of headlights swerving wildly ahead, followed by the horrifying sound of tires skidding on wet asphalt. David slowed his car, watching in shock as a sleek blue sports car ahead spun out of control, hit the guardrail and flipped over the edge of the road, tumbling down a short embankment. David's heart leaped to his throat. Without thinking, he pulled his car to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking frantically in the gloom. He grabbed his phone from the cup holder and dialed emergency services as he jumped out into the pouring rain. There's been an accident on Riverside Drive, about 2 miles east of the business district, he told the dispatcher, his voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. A car went off the road. I'm going to check on the driver. The dispatcher advised him to stay safe and wait for emergency services, but David couldn't just stand by, not when someone might be dying. He carefully made his way down the slippery embankment, his dress shoes sliding in the mud. The sports car had landed upside down, its expensive frame crumpled like paper. Worse still, David could see flames beginning to lick at the undercarriage, hissing as raindrops hit the hot metal. The smell of gasoline hung heavy in the air. Hello? Can you hear me? David shouted, approaching the wreck. Through the shattered driver's side window, he could make out a figure slumped forward, held in place by a seatbelt, unmoving. A young woman with dark hair, blood trickling down her face from a cut on her forehead. The flames were growing larger now, spreading to the engine compartment. David knew he had minutes, maybe seconds, before the whole thing went up. I'm going to get you out, he said firmly, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. He tried the door handle, but it was jammed. Looking around desperately, David spotted a heavy rock near the embankment. He grabbed it and, with all his strength, smashed it against the already cracked window until the glass gave way completely. The heat from the growing flames was intense now, singeing the sleeve of his jacket as he reached inside to unbuckle the woman's seatbelt. She was petite but limp, making it difficult for David to maneuver her through the window. The sharp edges of the broken glass cut into his hands as he worked, but he barely noticed the pain. Come on, just a little more, he grunted, finally managing to pull her upper body through the window. With one final heave, he dragged her completely free of the wreckage, stumbling backward with her weight in his arms. Not a moment too soon. With a whoosh that David felt more than heard, the car was engulfed in flames. The force of the sudden combustion knocked him off his feet, and he fell backward onto the wet ground, still clutching the unconscious woman to his chest. For a moment, he just lay there, rain pelting his face, his breathing heavy. Then his training kicked in, the mandatory first aid courses all Horizon employees took annually. He carefully laid the woman on the ground and checked for a pulse. It was there, weak but steady. Hey, can you hear me? He asked, gently tapping her cheek. No response. Her breathing was shallow, and David could see now that her leg was bent at an unnatural angle. She needed medical help immediately. The sound of sirens in the distance was the most welcome noise David had ever heard. He took off his suit jacket, now torn and singed, and draped it over the woman to shield her from the rain. Help is coming, he told her, taking her hand. It was cold and small in his larger one. Just hang in there. You're going to be okay. As he waited, David studied the woman's face. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with delicate features that reminded him of a painting he'd once seen in a museum. There was something vaguely familiar about her, but he couldn't place it. Maybe she worked in another department at Horizon. The paramedics arrived with remarkable efficiency, scrambling down the embankment with stretchers and medical equipment. 2 firefighters followed, heading straight for the burning vehicle to ensure no one else was trapped inside. "I found her like this," David explained as the paramedics took over. "She hasn't regained consciousness. The car just went up in flames right after I got her out." One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and efficient movements, nodded as she placed an oxygen mask over the victim's face. "You did good getting her out of there. Not many people would have risked that." Only then did David notice the burning pain in his hands and arms. Looking down, he saw his shirt was ripped and bloodied, with angry red burns visible on his forearms. His hands were cut in multiple places from the broken glass. "Sir, you need medical attention too," the second paramedic said, noticing his injuries. David shook his head. "Take care of her first." "I'll be fine. At least come up to the ambulance so we can check you out while they stabilize her," the paramedic insisted. "Those burns need cleaning." Reluctantly, David followed him up the embankment, his gaze still fixed on the young woman as she was carefully secured to a stretcher. The rain had lessened to a drizzle now, and the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles cast everything in an alternating red and blue glow. At the top of the embankment, a police officer was waiting to take his statement. David recounted what he had witnessed, his voice growing hoarse as the adrenaline began to wear off, leaving him shaky and cold. "Can you tell me where they're taking her?" he asked as the paramedics loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. "City General," the officer replied. "Would you like us to contact anyone for you, sir? You've had quite an ordeal." David thought of Mia waiting at home with Mrs. Patterson. He needed to call and let them know he'd be late, but first he wanted to make sure the young woman would be all right. "No, thank you. I'll be okay." He winced as a paramedic cleaned and wrapped his burned arms. "Do you know who she is? Did you find ID or anything?" The officer shook his head. "Not yet. Her purse might still be in the vehicle, but we'll have to wait until the fire's out. For now, she's Jane Doe." David watched as the ambulance doors closed. Through the small window, he could see the paramedics working on the woman, attaching monitors and IVs. As the ambulance pulled away, its siren wailing into the night, David felt a strange connection to this unknown person whose life he had just saved. "Sir?" The paramedic drew his attention back. "These burns aren't too severe, but you should still have a doctor look at them. And these cuts might need stitches." David nodded absently, his mind still on the mysterious woman. "I'll go to the hospital right after I check on my daughter." As he was given a blanket and led to a second ambulance, David couldn't shake the feeling that this night had changed something fundamental in his life. He just didn't know how yet. He called Mrs. Patterson from the ambulance, explaining that there had been an accident and he'd be late. The kind woman assured him she would stay with Mia as long as needed. "Are you hurt?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Just some minor burns and cuts," he reassured her. "Nothing serious." "But I saved someone, Mrs. Patterson. I pulled her out just before the car exploded." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "You're a good man, David Chen," Mrs. Patterson said finally. "Mia is lucky to have you as her father." As the ambulance made its way to the hospital, David leaned his head back and closed his eyes. The face of the woman he'd rescued floated in his mind. Who was she? Would she survive her injuries? And why couldn't he shake the feeling that he should know her from somewhere? Little did he know. The answers to these questions would soon turn his carefully balanced life completely upside down. The fluorescent lights of City General Hospital buzzed overhead as David sat in the emergency room, his bandaged hands resting on his knees. The doctor had cleaned and dressed his burns, stitched up the deeper cuts, and given him a tetanus shot just to be safe. He'd been told he could go home, but something kept him rooted to the uncomfortable plastic chair. "Excuse me," he said, stopping a passing nurse. "The woman from the car accident on Riverside Drive, do you know how she's doing?" The nurse's face softened with sympathy. "Are you family?" "No, I'm the one who pulled her from the car." Recognition dawned in the nurse's eyes. "Oh, you're the hero everyone's talking about. She's in surgery right now. That's all I can tell you without breaking confidentiality rules." David nodded, understanding. "Could you just let me know when she's out of surgery?" "I won't bother her, I need to know she's okay." The nurse hesitated, then smiled. "I'll see what I can do. Why don't you leave your number at the desk? Someone can call you when there's news." After giving his contact information to the receptionist, David finally left the hospital. It was past midnight when he pulled into his driveway. The lights were still on in his modest two-bedroom house, and he could see Mrs. Patterson's silhouette through the living room curtains. "Dad," Mia cried as soon as he opened the door. She threw herself at him, then pulled back with a gasp when she saw his bandaged arms. "You're hurt." David bent down to hug his daughter, ignoring the sting of his burns. "It's not as bad as it looks, kiddo. Just some scratches." Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her gray hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. "She refused to go to bed until you got home," she explained. "I made some tea." Over cups of chamomile tea and hot chocolate for Mia, David told them what had happened. He downplayed the danger, especially the part about the car exploding, but he couldn't hide his concern for the young woman he'd rescued. "Is she going to be okay?" Mia asked, her eyes wide with the drama of it all. "I hope so, sweetheart. The doctors are doing everything they can." After Mrs. Patterson left and he'd tucked Mia into bed with extra hugs, David sat alone in his kitchen. The events of the evening played on repeat in his mind. The screeching tires, the heat of the flames, the unconscious woman's face. He'd moved on instinct without thought for his own safety. Would anyone have done the same? He wasn't so sure. His phone rang early the next morning. It was the hospital, informing him that Jane Doe had made it through surgery and was in stable condition, though still unconscious. Her identity remained unknown. Her person ID had been destroyed in the fire. David went through the motions of his morning routine, making breakfast for Mia, checking her homework, dropping her at school. But his mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to the mystery woman whose life was now linked with his in a way he couldn't quite explain. At work, David tried to focus on the quarterly report due at the end of the week, but his bandaged hands made typing difficult, and the pain medication made his thoughts fuzzy. By mid-morning, the news of his heroic rescue had spread through the office like wildfire. "Chen, is it true you pulled someone from a burning car last night?" Tom from accounting stopped by his cubicle, eyes wide with excitement. Before David could answer, Lisa from HR joined them. "It's all over the morning news. They're calling you a local hero." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I just did what anyone would do." "Not anyone would run toward a burning car," Lisa pointed out. "Most people would have just called 911 and waited." More colleagues stopped by throughout the day, each wanting to hear the story firsthand. By lunchtime, David was exhausted from the attention, and his injuries were throbbing despite the medication. He was about to escape to the break room when his supervisor, Robert, appeared at his desk. "Chen, take the rest of the day off," Robert said, unusually gentle. "You look like you've been through hell, and those bandages can't make typing easy." David started to protest, but Robert held up a hand. "That's an order. Go home, rest, come back tomorrow if you're feeling better. The quarterly reports will still be here." Grateful for the reprieve, David gathered his things. As he was leaving the building, he overheard snippets of conversation in the lobby. CEO's daughter, terrible accident, critical condition. He paused, wondering if they were talking about his rescue, but they moved out of earshot before he could hear more. Shrugging it off, David headed to his car. Instead of going home, however, he found himself driving toward City General Hospital. At the reception desk, he hesitated. What was he doing here? He didn't even know the woman's name. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "I'm here about the car accident victim from last night," David said. "The one from Riverside Drive. I'm the person who pulled her from the car." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "Oh yes, we have you on record as the Good Samaritan." "Let me see." She tapped at her keyboard. "She's been moved to the ICU. Only family is allowed to visit, but since you saved her life, let me check with the charge nurse." After a brief phone conversation, the receptionist smiled at David. "Fourth floor, ICU waiting room. The nurse will meet you there." The ICU was quieter than the emergency room, with a hushed, tense atmosphere that spoke of the serious conditions being treated behind closed doors. A nurse met David at the waiting room entrance, her face professionally neutral. "Mr. Chen, I'm Nurse Taylor. You're here about our Jane Doe?" David nodded. "I just wanted to see how she's doing. She's stable, but still unconscious. The doctors induced a coma to help with the brain swelling from her concussion. She has a broken leg, 3 cracked ribs, and some internal bleeding that they repaired in surgery." The nurse studied David's face. "You really did save her life, you know. If she'd been in that car when it exploded." David swallowed hard. "Can I see her? Just for a minute?" Nurse Taylor hesitated, then nodded. "Normally it's family only, but since no one has come forward yet, Follow me, but just for a few minutes. She led David to a private room where machines beeped steadily, monitoring vital signs. The woman lay still on the bed, her dark hair spread across the white pillow. Without the blood and grime from the accident, David could see how young she was, mid-20s at most. A breathing tube was taped to her mouth and IVs ran into both arms. Her leg was elevated and encased in a cast. She looked so small, David murmured, standing awkwardly at the foot of the bed. We're doing everything we can for her, Nurse Taylor assured him. The police are trying to identify her through the car registration, but the vehicle was apparently leased through a company, so it's taking time. David nodded, his eyes still on the young woman's face. There was that nagging sense of familiarity again. Had he seen her at work? At Mia's school? He couldn't place it. I should go, he said finally. Thank you for letting me see her. As he turned to leave, the nurse touched his arm. It was a brave thing you did, Mr. Chen. Not everyone would have risked their life for a stranger. Back at home, David tried to relax, but his mind kept returning to the hospital room, to the unconscious young woman connected to all those machines. He made dinner for Mia, helped her with homework, and listened to her chatter about school, all while part of his thoughts remained with the mystery woman. That evening, as he was tucking Mia into bed, his daughter asked, Dad, do you think the lady you saved has a family? Are they worried about her? The innocent question hit David hard. Somewhere, this woman's parents, siblings, maybe even a partner, had no idea what had happened to her. Were they searching for her? Filing missing persons reports. The thought made his chest ache. I'm sure she does, sweetie, and I'm sure they'll find her soon. The next morning, David returned to work, his injuries still painful but his mind clearer. The office was buzzing with a new kind of energy, the kind that only happens when big news is breaking. Did you hear? Tom from accounting practically pounced on David as soon as he stepped off the elevator. Victoria Reynolds' daughter was in a terrible accident last night. David froze. Victoria Reynolds was the CEO of Horizon Innovations, a brilliant businesswoman known for her razor-sharp mind and equally sharp tongue. In the 8 years David had worked for the company, he'd only seen her in person twice, both times from a distance during company-wide meetings. Her daughter? David repeated, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. Yeah, apparently she was driving back from some charity event when she crashed her car. It's all over the company email. Reynolds has taken emergency leave to be with her. David's mind raced. Could it be? Was the woman he'd pulled from the burning car actually his boss's daughter? It would explain why she'd looked vaguely familiar. Perhaps he'd seen her photo on Victoria Reynolds' desk during one of those company meetings. Throughout the day, the accident was the only thing anyone at Horizon could talk about. Details emerged bit by bit. The daughter's name was Elena Reynolds, 24 years old, a recent graduate with a master's degree in environmental science. She'd been driving her mother's company car because her own was in the shop. The accident had happened on Riverside Drive. There was no longer any doubt in David's mind. The woman he'd saved was Elena Reynolds, daughter of the formidable Victoria Reynolds, a woman known throughout the company for her exacting standards and frosty demeanor. A woman who could make or break careers with a single word. By afternoon, the news had been confirmed by an official company-wide email expressing concern for the Reynolds family and asking employees to respect their privacy during this difficult time. Robert called a team meeting to redistribute Victoria's most urgent tasks among the executive team. The CEO will be out indefinitely, he told them, his usual joking manner subdued. Her daughter is in critical condition at City General. It's touch and go right now. David said nothing during the meeting, his mind whirling with the implications. Should he tell someone that he was the one who had rescued Elena? Would Victoria Reynolds want to know? Or would she prefer to focus on her daughter's recovery, without dealing with a mid-level manager's sudden involvement in their lives? As the day wore on, David decided to keep quiet for now. The important thing was that Elena recover, not that he get credit for helping her. Besides, he'd never been comfortable with attention or praise. He'd done what anyone would do, what he hoped someone would do for Mia if she were ever in trouble. That evening, as David drove home through the rain, lighter than the night before, but still steady, he passed the spot where the accident had happened. The guardrail was bent and blackened, and bits of debris still littered the embankment despite the cleanup efforts. He slowed, remembering the terror of those moments, the heat of the flames, the weight of Elena's unconscious body in his arms. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. An unknown number. David pulled over to answer it. Mr. Chen? A woman's voice, professionally warm. This is Dr. Patel from City General Hospital. I'm calling about the patient you helped last night. David's grip tightened on the phone. Yes, how is she? She's been identified as Elena Reynolds. Her mother is with her now. The doctor paused. We've told Ms. Reynolds about your role in saving her daughter's life. She's asked to meet you. Victoria Reynolds wanted to meet him. The CEO of Horizon Innovations, known throughout the company as the Ice Queen, wanted to meet David Chen, the unremarkable mid-level manager who had pulled her daughter from a burning car. When? David asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Tomorrow, if possible. Ms. Reynolds doesn't like to wait. No, David thought. She wouldn't. Victoria Reynolds was known for her impatience with inefficiency, her intolerance for delays. What would she make of him with his rumpled suits and his quiet life? Would she thank him? Offer him a reward? Or simply acknowledge his action with the cool detachment for which she was famous? I'll be there, he said finally. Tell her I'll come by after work around 6. As he hung up and pulled back onto the road, David couldn't help but wonder how this meeting would change things. Little did he know, his life was about to take a turn he could never have anticipated. The next day dragged on endlessly for David. He kept checking the clock, his stomach knotting tighter with each passing hour. By 5 o'clock, he could barely focus on the spreadsheet in front of him. The thought of meeting Victoria Reynolds face-to-face made his palms sweat. You okay, Chen? Robert asked, stopping by his desk. You look like you're about to face a firing squad. David managed a weak smile. Just tired. These burns are making it hard to sleep. Robert nodded sympathetically, but David could tell he didn't quite believe him. How could he explain that in less than an hour he would be meeting the CEO whose daughter he had pulled from a burning wreck? It sounded absurd even to him. At 5:30, David packed up his things and headed to the hospital. The drive gave him time to gather his thoughts. What would he say to Victoria Reynolds? Should he mention that they worked at the same company? Would she even care about that detail when her daughter was lying in a hospital bed? The hospital seemed busier than the day before. David made his way to the ICU, where a security guard checked his ID before allowing him through. Apparently, the CEO's presence warranted extra precautions. Nurse Taylor met him in the waiting room, her expression professionally neutral. Mr. Chen, Ms. Reynolds is expecting you. Elena has been moved to a private room on the 5th floor. Follow me, please. As they rode the elevator up, David tugged at his tie, suddenly aware of his unremarkable suit and scuffed shoes. Victoria Reynolds was known for her impeccable appearance, always dressed in designer clothing that probably cost more than his monthly salary. How is Elena doing? He asked the nurse, needing to break the silence. Better. They've reduced her sedation, and she's showing signs of waking up. The elevator doors opened and Nurse Taylor led him down a hallway to a private room with a uniformed security guard stationed outside. Ms. Reynolds is waiting inside. With a deep breath, David knocked lightly on the door and entered. The room was spacious for a hospital, with large windows overlooking the city. Flowers covered every available surface. Roses, lilies, orchids, and elegant arrangements, each with cards attached. Medical equipment beeped softly, monitoring the still figure in the bed. And there, standing by the window, was Victoria Reynolds. David had seen her before. Of course, at company meetings, in press photos, on the cover of business magazines. But those glimpses hadn't prepared him for her presence. Even in what was clearly a moment of personal crisis, she radiated authority. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in a sleek knot, her gray suit unwrinkled despite what must have been hours at her daughter's bedside. She turned as he entered, and David was struck by how much Elena resembled her. The same delicate features, the same dark hair. But where Elena's unconscious face was soft in youth, Victoria's was sharp with experience and what looked like years of disappointment. Mr. Chen, she said, her voice cool but not unfriendly. Thank you for coming. David stepped forward, acutely aware of his bandaged hands. Ms. Reynolds, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. She gestured to a chair beside Elena's bed. Please sit. Your hands must be painful. As David took the offered seat, Victoria remained standing, her gaze shifting between him and her daughter. The doctors tell me that without your intervention, Elena would have died in that car. They say the fire would have... She paused, something flickering across her composed face. Well, suffice it to say I owe you a debt I can never repay. Anyone would have done the same, David said automatically. Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly. I think we both know that's not true, Mr. Chen. Most people would have called 911 and waited safely by the roadside. You chose to risk your life for a stranger. She moved to the other side of Elena's bed, adjusting the blanket with a gentle touch that seemed at odds with her stern demeanor. May I ask why? The question caught David off guard. Why had he rushed toward a burning car instead of waiting for help? He thought of Mia, of how he would want someone to help her if she were in danger. I have a daughter, he said simply. I couldn't just stand there knowing someone else's child needed help. Something softened in Victoria's eyes. A father. I should have guessed. How old is your daughter? 12. Her name is Mia. Victoria nodded, her gaze returning to Elena's still face. Elena is my only child. We've had our differences over the years, especially after her father and I divorced. Her voice remained steady, but David could hear the effort it took. I've always put my career first. It's something Elena has never quite forgiven me for. David wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected confidence. Before he could think of something appropriate to say, Victoria continued. The last time we spoke was 6 months ago. An argument, naturally. She thought I was too focused on work, too cold, too controlling. She smoothed a strand of hair from Elena's forehead, the gesture achingly tender. Perhaps she was right. David shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with this glimpse behind the CEO's public persona. Family relationships are complicated, he offered, especially between parents and children. Victoria looked at him with new interest. You speak from experience, Mr. Chen? My wife died 5 years ago, David said. The word still difficult even after all this time. Cancer. Mia was only 7. It's been just the two of us since then, trying to figure things out day by day. I'm sorry for your loss, Victoria said. And to David's surprise, she seemed genuinely sympathetic. Raising a child alone must be challenging. It is, David agreed. But worth it.
Mia is
everything to me. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. You know, Mr. Chen, I've always prided myself on knowing everything about my employees, but I don't recall seeing your name before. So she knew they worked at the same company. David wasn't entirely surprised. Victoria Reynolds had a reputation for thoroughness. I'm in the marketing analysis department, he explained. Been with Horizon for 8 years now. 8 years, Victoria repeated. And yet we've never properly met until now. An oversight on my part, clearly. She gave him a small, measured smile, though I doubt you expected to meet your CEO under these circumstances. David returned her smile, feeling slightly more at ease. It wasn't in my 5-year career plan, no. Victoria's phone buzzed and she glanced at it with a frown. Excuse me, I need to take this. Hospital policy is remarkably strict, even for someone in my position. I'll step outside. As she left the room, David found himself alone with Elena. Her face was less pale than it had been the day before, and the breathing tube had been replaced with a nasal cannula. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was somehow reassuring. You're going to be okay, he told her quietly, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. Your mom is here. She's worried about you. To his shock, Elena's eyelids fluttered. Her fingers twitched on the blanket. David froze, unsure if he should call for a nurse. Elena, he said softly. Can you hear me? Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening. She looked at David with confusion, her brow furrowing weakly. Who? Her voice was barely audible, raspy from disuse. My name is David Chen, he told her, leaning forward slightly. I was there when your car crashed. Do you remember anything? Elena's eyes closed again, her face scrunching slightly with effort. Rain, she whispered. Lights, then nothing. That's okay, David assured her. You're in the hospital. You've been here for a couple of days. So your mom is just outside. At the mention of her mother, something shifted in Elena's expression, a tightening around her eyes, a slight downturn of her lips. She came, she murmured, sounding surprised. Of course she did, David said gently. She's barely left your side, from what I understand. Elena's gaze returned to him, more alert now. You saved me? David nodded. I was driving behind you. I saw the crash. The car was burning. It wasn't a question, but a fragment of memory surfacing. Yes, but you're safe now. David reached for the call button. I should let the nurses know you're awake. Before he could press it, the door opened and Victoria returned, her phone call apparently finished. She stopped abruptly when she saw Elena's open eyes. Elena? Her composed voice cracked on the name. In 2 quick steps, she was at her daughter's side, taking her hand carefully between both of her own. Oh, thank God. The doctor said it might be days before you woke up. Elena's gaze moved slowly from David to her mother. Mom, she said weakly. You're actually here. Something complicated passed across Victoria's face. Relief, love, and old pain all mingled together. Of course I'm here. Where else would I be? At work, Elena whispered. Always. At work. Victoria flinched as if struck, but her voice remained gentle. Not this time. Not anymore. She pressed the call button David had been reaching for. We need to let the doctors know you're awake. The room was suddenly filled with activity as doctors and nurses came to check on Elena, adjusting medications, asking her questions, shining lights in her eyes. David stood and moved to the corner, feeling increasingly out of place in this family reunion. As the medical staff worked, Victoria caught his eye across the room and mouthed a clear thank you. There was a depth of emotion in her eyes that belied her reputation for coldness. David nodded in acknowledgement, then slipped quietly out of the room. His part in this story was done. Elena was awake, recovering with her mother by her side. It was time for him to go home to Mia, but as he waited for the elevator, Victoria Reynolds appeared beside him, slightly breathless as if she'd hurried to catch him. Mr. Chen, she said. You're leaving? David nodded. Elena is awake and you both need time together. I don't want to intrude. You saved my daughter's life, Victoria said firmly. You could never be an intrusion. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, not her standard company card, David noticed, but something more personal with just her name and a phone number. I'd like to properly thank you. Dinner perhaps once Elena is more stable. You and your daughter would be my guests. David took the card, surprised by the invitation. That's very kind, but really not necessary. I insist, Victoria said in a tone that David suspected had ended many business negotiations in her favor. And there's something else. Something I've been considering since we spoke earlier. The elevator arrived, but David made no move to enter it. Oh? I've been reviewing department budgets recently, Victoria said. Marketing analysis has been consistently underperforming for the past 3 quarters. The leadership is stale, lacking innovation. David tensed, wondering if this was leading to news of layoffs or restructuring. But I've heard from Robert that you have interesting ideas, she continued. Ideas that have been consistently overlooked by current management. I've submitted some proposals, David acknowledged cautiously. Nothing revolutionary. I've asked to see them, Victoria said. All of them. I have a feeling they deserve more attention than they've received. She straightened her already perfect jacket. This experience has made me realize I've been too removed from the day-to-day operations of Horizon. Too insulated in my executive bubble. That's going to change, starting with a closer look at talent that might have been overlooked. David wasn't quite sure what to say. Was Victoria Reynolds offering him a promotion, or merely using him as the starting point for a larger restructuring effort? I should get back to Elena, Victoria said, checking her watch. But I meant what I said about dinner. Call that number, Mr. Chen. It's my personal line, not my assistant's. I'll make time. With a nod that somehow conveyed both gratitude and dismissal, Victoria turned and walked back toward Elena's room, her heels clicking authoritatively on the hospital floor. David stood there for a moment, the business card light between his fingers. Then he pocketed it, stepped into the waiting elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed and the elevator began to descend, David couldn't help but feel that his life had just taken a turn he could never have anticipated. By pulling Elena Reynolds from that burning car, he had inadvertently caught the attention of the most powerful woman at Horizon Innovations. What that would mean for his future, and for Mia's, remained to be seen. But for the first time in a long while, David felt something like hope stirring in his chest. Not just the day-to-day hope of making ends meet and giving Mia a stable life, but hope for something more, something better. It was a feeling he'd almost forgotten. 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity for David. At work, Rumors swirled about a major restructuring in the marketing department. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged him before now sought him out, fishing for information he didn't have. Robert had become strangely attentive, stopping by David's desk several times a day with coffee and questions about his innovative ideas. At home, Mia had taken to calling him Hero Dad, a nickname that made David both proud and embarrassed. Mrs. Patterson had baked him 3 different casseroles for the brave young man, and neighbors who had previously only nodded in passing now stopped to chat when he collected the mail. Through it all, David had kept Victoria Reynolds' card in his wallet, unused. He'd checked the news about Elena's condition. The local paper had run a small piece about the CEO's daughter's miraculous recovery, but he hadn't returned to the hospital. Something held him back, a sense that he'd already crossed some invisible boundary between his world and the rarefied air of the Reynolds family. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when his office phone rang, the display showing a number he didn't recognize. "David Chen speaking," he answered, tucking the phone between his ear and shoulder as he continued typing an email. "Mr. Chen." The crisp, authoritative voice was unmistakable. "This is Victoria Reynolds." David's fingers froze on the keyboard. "Ms. Reynolds, hello? You haven't called," she said, getting straight to the point. "I was beginning to think you'd lost my card. No, I didn't want to intrude. I assumed you'd be busy with Elena's recovery." "Elena is doing remarkably well," Victoria said. "She's being discharged tomorrow, in fact, which brings me to the purpose of my call. She's asked to meet you, properly this time while conscious." David hadn't expected this. "Oh, well, of course. I'd be happy to." "Excellent. Tomorrow evening, then. My home 7 o'clock. Bring your daughter. Elena specifically requested she come as well." Victoria rattled off an address in Riverside Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. "It's nothing formal, just dinner. A small thank you for saving my daughter's life." Before David could respond, Victoria continued, her tone shifting slightly. "And afterward, perhaps we could discuss your ideas for the marketing department. I've reviewed your proposals. They're intriguing." The way she said intriguing made David think it was high praise coming from Victoria Reynolds. "That would be nice," he managed to say, his mind spinning with implications. "Until tomorrow. Then." And she was gone, the line clicking dead before David could say goodbye. He sat back in his chair, staring at the phone. Dinner at Victoria Reynolds' home, with Mia, and a discussion about his work proposals. It felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. "Everything okay, Chen?" Robert appeared at his cubicle entrance, coffee in hand as usual. "Fine," David said automatically. "Just unexpected call." Robert's eyes narrowed with interest. "Anything I should know about? As your supervisor?" David hesitated. Should he tell Robert that the CEO had personally invited him to dinner, that she wanted to discuss his marketing ideas? It seemed like bragging, and besides, he wasn't entirely sure what Victoria's intentions were. "Just personal stuff," he said finally. "Nothing important?" Robert looked disappointed but nodded. "Well, if you need to take time off or anything, just let me know. We're all team players here." After Robert left, David found himself unable to focus on work. His thoughts kept drifting to tomorrow's dinner. What would he wear? What would Mia wear? Should he bring something? Wine, flowers? Did Victoria Reynolds even drink wine, or would that be presumptuous? More importantly, what did she want to discuss about his marketing proposals? They were good ideas, he knew that, but hardly revolutionary. Mostly suggestions for targeting smaller, niche markets that the company had overlooked, and using data analytics to predict consumer behavior more accurately. When he picked up Mia from school that afternoon, he broke the news about the dinner invitation. "We're going to have dinner with my boss?" Mia asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "The lady whose daughter you saved?" "Yes, but Mia, she's not just my boss. She's the CEO, the person who runs the entire company." Mia's eyes grew even wider. "Well, is she super rich? Does she have a mansion? With a pool?" David chuckled despite his nerves. "I don't know about the pool, but yes, she lives in a nice house in Riverside Heights. The big houses on the hill." Mia bounced in her seat. "Cool. Can I wear my blue dress? The one from Aunt Jenny?" "That would be perfect," David assured her, grateful for his sister's habit of sending Mia expensive clothes for birthdays and Christmas. The next day crawled by at work. David checked the clock so often that Robert joked he must have a hot date. Actually, David admitted. I'm having dinner with Victoria Reynolds tonight. Robert's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. You're what? She invited me to dinner, as a thank you for helping her daughter. Robert set down his mug slowly. Chen, do you understand what this could mean? Reynolds never, and I mean never, socializes with employees below executive level. If she's invited you to her home, he shook his head in disbelief. You could be looking at a serious promotion. David tried to temper his expectations. Or she just wants to say thank you for saving her daughter. Let's not read too much into it. But Robert's words stayed with him throughout the day, adding to his nervousness. By the time he and Mia were in the car, driving up the winding road to Riverside Heights, David's stomach was in knots. Victoria's home was not the ostentatious mansion he had half expected. It was large, certainly, and elegantly situated on a hill overlooking the city, but it had a restrained, almost understated beauty. The grounds were immaculate, with carefully tended gardens and subtle landscape lighting that created a warm, welcoming atmosphere. As they walked to the front door, Mia slipped her hand into his. Dad, you're squeezing my other hand too tight. David immediately loosened his grip. Sorry, kiddo. Just a little nervous. Mia looked up at him, serious in her blue dress with her hair neatly braided. Don't worry, Dad, the lady will like you. Everyone likes you. David smiled down at his daughter, his heart swelling with love. Thanks, Mia, but even if she doesn't, that's okay too. We're just here for dinner, not a job interview. The door opened before they could ring the bell, revealing not Victoria but Elena Reynolds. She was in a wheelchair, her broken leg extended in a cast covered with colorful signatures. Her face still showed fading bruises, but her smile was warm and genuine. You must be David, she said, wheeling back to allow them entry. And this is Mia. Mom told me you were coming. I'm Elena. David was struck again by how much Elena resembled her mother, yet how different she seemed in temperament. Where Victoria was all cool efficiency, Elena radiated a kind of open warmth that put him immediately at ease. It's good to see you looking so well, he said honestly. The last time I saw you, I was a bit of a mess, Elena finished for him, grinning. That's what happens when you drive too fast in the rain and flip your car, I guess. But thanks to you, I'm still here to learn from my mistakes. She turned her attention to Mia. I love your dress. Blue is my favorite color too. Mia, usually shy with strangers, beamed at the compliment. Thank you. I like your wheelchair. Can I sign your cast? Elena laughed. Absolutely. I've been collecting signatures. Come on in, both of you. Mom's in the kitchen finishing dinner. David nearly tripped over his own feet. Your mother cooks? Shocked me too, Elena confided as she led them through an elegantly appointed living room. Apparently she's been taking classes for months but didn't tell me. She says she wanted to surprise me when I came to visit, which I rarely do because we usually end up arguing. Then the accident happened and, well, here we are. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all gleaming stainless steel appliances and polished granite countertops, and there, wearing an apron over her usual impeccable attire, was Victoria Reynolds, CEO of Horizon Innovations, stirring something that smelled mouth-wateringly good. David, Mia, welcome, she said, setting down her wooden spoon. I hope you found the place without difficulty. The GPS brought us right here, David assured her, still trying to reconcile the image of Victoria in an apron with the intimidating executive he knew from work. Excellent. Victoria wiped her hands on a towel. Dinner's almost ready. Elena, why don't you show them around while I finish up? Sure thing, Mom. Elena spun her wheelchair with practiced ease. Come on, I'll give you the grand tour. The house was beautiful inside with tasteful artwork and comfortable, expensive furniture. But what struck David most was how lived in it felt. There were books everywhere, on shelves, on side tables, stacked beside comfortable reading chairs. Photos lined the walls and mantelpiece, most of them of Elena at various ages, though David noticed there were very few recent ones. This is a lovely home, he commented as Elena showed them the garden view from the sunroom. It is, Elena agreed, a hint of something like regret in her voice. Though I haven't spent much time here in recent years. Mom and I, well, we've had our issues. Mia, who had been examining a collection of snow globes, looked up. My dad and I argue sometimes too, especially about bedtime and vegetables. Elena smiled at the girl. Bedtimes and vegetables are worth arguing about. Mom and I argued about bigger things. I thought she cared more about her company than about me. And did she? Mia asked with the directness only children can get away with. Elena's expression softened. I'm starting to think maybe she cared about both and I just couldn't see it. She glanced at David. The accident changed things. Mom hasn't left my side since it happened. She even postponed the Singapore merger to stay with me in the hospital. David raised his eyebrows. The Singapore merger had been big news in the business world, a deal that would significantly expand Horizon's market in Asia. She postponed it? That must have been a difficult decision, Elena shrugged. For the old mom, it would have been impossible. But something's different now. She's different. Her gaze grew thoughtful. She talks about you a lot, you know. About how you risked your life for a complete stranger. David felt his face warm. Like I said, anyone would have. No, Elena interrupted gently. Not anyone. Most people would have called 911 and waited. You ran toward danger to help someone you didn't know. She smiled. It made an impression on Mom. She says it reminded her of what's really important in life. Before David could respond, Victoria called them to dinner. The dining room was less formal than David had expected, with a round table that encouraged conversation. The meal itself was simple but delicious. Roast chicken with herbs, creamy mashed potatoes, and fresh vegetables. This is amazing, David said after his first bite. I had no idea you could cook like this. Victoria's lips curved in a small, pleased smile. A recent skill. My instructor says I have a natural precision that serves me well in the kitchen. Mom's always been good at following directions. Elena teased, a warmth in her voice that suggested this kind of banter was new between them. To David's surprise, the conversation flowed easily throughout dinner. Mia charmed them all with stories about school and her soccer team, while Elena shared some of her work in environmental science. A passion that clearly made Victoria proud, though she occasionally made suggestions that sounded suspiciously like business advice. It was during dessert, a chocolate mousse that made Mia's eyes go wide with delight. That Victoria finally brought up work. David, I've been reviewing your marketing proposals, she said, setting down her spoon. The ones about targeting smaller specialized markets with customized approaches. David nodded, suddenly nervous again. Yes, I've been working on those for a while. They're excellent, Victoria said simply. Forward-thinking, data-driven, and with potential for significant ROI without major capital investment. Exactly the kind of innovative thinking Horizon needs right now. David blinked, not sure he had heard correctly. Thank you. That's very kind. It's not kindness, it's assessment, Victoria corrected, though not unkindly. The current leadership in marketing has become complacent, focusing on traditional channels while ignoring emerging opportunities. Your proposals address that gap. She took a sip of water, her eyes never leaving his face. I'm restructuring the department, creating a new division focused specifically on emerging markets and data-driven marketing strategies. I'd like you to head it. David nearly choked on his mousse. Head it, as in run the division? Yes, Vice President of Emerging Market Strategies. Reporting directly to me. Victoria's expression remained businesslike, but there was a hint of amusement in her eyes at his shock. Unless you're not interested. No. I mean, yes, I'm interested. David struggled to collect his thoughts. It's just unexpected. I'm a mid-level manager. There are people with more experience, more seniority. Experience and seniority don't always translate to vision, Victoria said dismissively. You see opportunities others miss. That's rare and valuable. Elena, who had been watching this exchange with interest, chimed in. Plus, you did save the boss's daughter. That's got to count for something on your performance review. Victoria shot her daughter a look that was half exasperation, half affection. Elena? What? I'm just saying what everyone will think anyway. Elena grinned at David. But for what it's worth, Mom was impressed with your ideas before she knew you were the one who pulled me from the car. She mentioned some promising proposals for marketing when she visited me in the hospital that first day. David looked between mother and daughter, trying to process what was happening. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mia piped up, chocolate mousse smeared around her mouth. Dad always says you should take chances when they come. All three adults laughed, breaking the tension. David reached over to wipe Mia's mouth with a napkin. Wise advice, kiddo. Though I usually apply it to trying new foods or activities, not career decisions. The principle is the same, Victoria said. This is an opportunity, David. One I think you're uniquely qualified for. The salary would be significantly increased, of course, and there would be other benefits, flexible hours, for instance, which I imagine would be helpful for a single parent. The mention of flexible hours struck a chord with David. How many school events had he missed because of rigid work schedules? How many times had he relied on Mrs. Patterson to pick up Mia when meetings ran late? "I'd need some time to think about it," he said finally. "It's a big change," Victoria nodded, apparently satisfied. "Of course. Take the weekend. We can discuss details on Monday." She stood, signaling the end of the business discussion. Now Elena mentioned something about signing her cast. The rest of the evening passed in a more relaxed atmosphere. Mia carefully added her name to Elena's cast in purple marker, complete with a small flower drawing. David and Victoria moved to the living room with coffee, discussing books they had both enjoyed, a common interest that surprised David. As the evening wound down, Elena pulled David aside while Victoria was helping Mia find the bathroom. "You should take the job," she said without preamble. "Mom doesn't offer opportunities like this lightly." David ran a hand through his hair. "It's a big step up. I'm not sure I'm ready." Elena studied him thoughtfully. "You know what I've learned since the accident? None of us are ever really ready for the big moments in life. They just happen, and we either step up or we don't." She adjusted her position in the wheelchair, wincing slightly. "You stepped up when you saw a car on fire. Most people wouldn't have." "That was different," David protested. "That was instinct." "Maybe," Elena conceded. "Or maybe it was character. The same character that made you develop marketing proposals no one asked for, because you saw a better way forward." She smiled. "Mom sees it too, you know." "That's rare. She doesn't impress easily." When it was time to leave, Victoria walked them to the door, while Elena waved goodbye from the living room. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said, her tone warmer than David had ever heard it at work. "It meant a lot to Elena, to both of us." "We had a wonderful time," David assured her. "Thank you for dinner. And for the opportunity." Victoria nodded, understanding he meant the job offer. "Consider it carefully, but not too carefully. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones we make with both our head and our heart." Her gaze shifted to Mia, who was yawning despite her best efforts to appear wide awake. "You have a remarkable daughter, David. She reminds me of Elena at that age. Curious, direct, unafraid to speak her mind. She's the best thing that ever happened to me," David said honestly. "Children have a way of teaching us what really matters." Victoria's expression grew distant for a moment. "I forgot that lesson for a while." It took almost losing Elena to remember it. As they drove home, Mia fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement of the evening. David glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his heart full of love for this small person who had shaped his life in ways he could never have imagined. Victoria's job offer played in his mind. Vice President of Emerging Market Strategies, a significant salary increase, flexible hours, reporting directly to the CEO. It was the kind of opportunity that came once in a career, if ever. But what struck him most was not the title or the money. It was the recognition. For years he had submitted proposals, suggested improvements, tried to innovate within his limited sphere of influence, and for years those ideas had been politely acknowledged and then filed away, forgotten. Now Victoria Reynolds, the Ice Queen herself, had not only read his proposals but understood their value, had seen something in him that others had missed or ignored. As he pulled into their driveway, David made his decision. Monday morning, he would accept Victoria's offer, not because he had saved Elena's life, though that connection would always be special, but because he believed in his ideas and his ability to implement them. For the first time in a long while, David felt like he was steering his own life instead of just responding to circumstances. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. Carrying a sleeping Mia into the house, David wondered what other changes this unexpected turn in his life might bring. Little did he know, the rescue that had brought him to Victoria's attention was just the beginning of a journey that would transform not only his career, but his life in ways he could never have imagined. 6 months had passed since the night of the accident, and David Chen's life had transformed in ways he could never have predicted. The spring air was warm and fragrant with blossoms as David parked his car, a new, safer model he'd purchased with his increased salary, in the reserved spot marked VP Emerging Markets. The title still felt strange sometimes, like a suit that hadn't quite been broken in, but the work itself had proven to be everything he'd hoped for and more. His phone buzzed as he walked toward Horizon's glass-fronted headquarters. A text from Elena. Don't forget, gala tonight, 7 p.m. Mom's in a state about the presentation. Bring Mia early so we can hang out before the boring speeches start. David smiled as he texted back a thumbs-up emoji. Elena had become a fixture in their lives over the past months, first as an occasional dinner guest, then as Mia's unofficial big sister and homework helper. Her environmental science background had sparked Mia's interest in a school project about local watersheds, which had won first prize at the science fair. The office hummed with the energy of impending celebration. Tonight's gala was more than the usual corporate function. It was the official launch of Horizon's new Sustainable Innovation Initiative, a groundbreaking program that combined Elena's environmental expertise with David's market strategies and Victoria's business acumen. Morning, boss. Lily, David's assistant, greeted him with her usual enthusiasm. Your 9:30 with the digital team is set up in conference room B. The quarterly reports are on your desk for review, and I got those pastries you like for the morning meeting, the ones with the almond filling. Lily, you're a miracle worker, David said gratefully, accepting the coffee she handed him, prepared exactly as he liked it. His new office still felt like a luxury, spacious, with a view of the city park and enough room for the framed photos of Mia that dotted his desk. But the best feature, in David's opinion, was the small adjoining room he'd converted into a homework space for the days when Mia came to the office after school. The morning passed in a productive blur of meetings and decisions. David's team, handpicked from throughout the company for their creativity and data skills, had exceeded all expectations in their first 6 months. Their targeted marketing strategies had opened up new customer segments that Horizon had previously overlooked, resulting in a 23% revenue increase in those markets. Just before lunch, Victoria stopped by his office, something that no longer caused the ripple of nervousness it once had. Their working relationship had evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect, with Victoria's strategic vision complementing David's innovative approach. Ready for tonight? She asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. She looked as impeccable as always, but David had learned to read the subtle signs of her moods. The slight tension around her eyes today suggested pre-event stress. Everything's prepared, he assured her. The presentation is ready, the press packets are excellent, and the demonstration models are set up at the venue. Victoria nodded, some of the tension easing. Good, this initiative means a lot to me. To all of us. She glanced at the photo on his desk, a recent one of David, Mia, Victoria, and Elena at the lake house Victoria owned, all 4 of them laughing as they tried to fit into a single canoe. Elena is so proud of this project. She keeps calling her colleagues to brag about how her mother's company is finally doing something right for the planet. David chuckled. She's invested in it. We all are. He hesitated, then asked, How are things with you two? Since the therapy sessions started? The question would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Too personal, too presumptuous. But their relationship had changed, boundaries shifting as their lives became more intertwined. Victoria's expression softened. Better. Not perfect, but better. We're talking more. Really talking. Not just arguing or avoiding the hard subjects. She straightened a pen on his desk that didn't need straightening. She says I'm less controlling. I say she's more understanding. Either way, we're finding a balance, and that's good to hear. Victoria stood, smoothing her already perfect skirt. Yes, well, the accident changed things. Put them in perspective. Her gaze met his directly, as did meeting you, David. Before he could respond to this unexpected admission, Victoria had moved on to business again. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. And remind Mia that she's sitting at the head table with us. After she left, David sat back in his chair, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. Taking Victoria's job offer had been just the beginning. The real challenge had been proving himself worthy of it, not just to the company or to Victoria, but to himself. There had been skeptics, of course. Whispers that he'd gotten the position only because he'd saved the CEO's daughter. Comments about sleeping his way to the top, though those had stopped abruptly after Victoria had coldly dismantled the executive who'd been foolish. enough to make such an insinuation in her hearing, but David had let his work speak for itself. His ideas, finally given room to flourish, had proven their worth. The team he'd built was cohesive and effective, and the Sustainable Innovation Initiative, which combined environmentally friendly products with his targeted marketing strategies, was poised to become Horizon's most successful launch in a decade. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Mrs. Patterson. "David, dear, I hate to bother you at work, but Mia's school just called. She's in the nurse's office with a fever." David was already standing, gathering his keys. "I'm on my way. Have they called a doctor?" "The nurse says it's just a virus that's going around, but Mia's temperature is 101, and school policy says she needs to go home. Tell them I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." He quickly informed Lily of the situation, rescheduled his afternoon meetings, and headed for his car. As he drove to Mia's school, he reflected on how different this moment would have been 6 months ago. The stress of leaving work midday, the worry about what his supervisor would think, the scramble to find someone to look after Mia while he returned to the office. Now, his position gave him the flexibility to put Mia first without jeopardizing his career. It was one of the many unexpected benefits of his new role, one he appreciated perhaps more than the salary or the title. Mia was pale but smiling when he arrived at the nurse's office. "Dad, you came!" "Of course I came, kiddo. You're sick." He pressed a hand to her forehead, definitely warm. "Let's get you home and into bed." As they drove, Mia leaned her head against the window, uncharacteristically quiet. "Dad, am I going to miss the gala tonight?" David glanced at her, hearing the disappointment in her voice. The gala had been a hot topic of conversation for weeks, with Mia excited about wearing the new dress they'd bought especially for the occasion. "We'll see how you're feeling later," he said gently. "Your health comes first." At home, he tucked Mia into bed with her favorite stuffed panda, gave her the children's fever reducer the nurse had recommended, and set up her tablet so she could watch movies. Then he called Victoria. "Mia's sick," he explained. "Nothing serious, just a fever, but she needs to stay home and rest." Victoria's concern was immediate. "Poor thing. Is there anything she needs? I can send over my personal physician." "No need for that," David assured her, still sometimes surprised by Victoria's grand gestures. "It's just a virus going around the school. But I might not make it to the gala tonight if she's not feeling better." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "David, you're presenting the market strategy portion of the initiative. We need you there." "I know, and I'm sorry." "But Mia—" "Bring her to my house," Victoria interrupted. "Elena is working from home today. She can look after Mia while you're at the gala. You'll be just minutes away if she needs you." David hesitated. "Victoria, I can't ask Elena to babysit a sick child." "You're not asking, I am. And it's not babysitting, it's family helping family." There was another pause, shorter this time. "That is, if you're comfortable with the arrangement. Family helping family." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither of them had directly addressed. Over the past months, the four of them, David, Mia, Victoria, and Elena, had spent more and more time together. Weekend outings, movie nights, impromptu dinners. A unit that wasn't quite defined but felt increasingly natural. "Let me ask Mia," David said finally. "If she's feeling up to it, we'll come over around 5. But if she gets worse, I'm staying with her, gala or no gala." "Of course," Victoria agreed immediately. "Mia comes first, always." When David told Mia about the plan, her face brightened despite her fever. "So I still get to go to the big house? And hang out with Elena?" "Just to rest," David emphasized. "No running around or playing outside. You'll stay in bed or on the couch and let Elena take care of you while I'm at the gala, and if you start feeling worse, I'll come right back." Mia nodded solemnly, then asked with the directness only children possess. "Dad, do you like Miss Reynolds? Like her?" The question caught David off guard. "Miss Reynolds is my boss, Mia. Elena says her mom smiles more when you're around. And you laugh at her jokes even when they're not funny." David felt a flush creeping up his neck that had nothing to do with Mia's fever. "Ms. Reynolds and I work together. We're friends." Mia gave him a look that suggested she wasn't convinced but was willing to let it go for now. "Okay, can I watch another movie?" By 5 o'clock, Mia's fever had reduced enough that David felt comfortable taking her to Victoria's house. They were greeted at the door by Elena, now fully recovered from her injuries and walking with only the slightest hint of a limp. "Hey, sick bug. Elena said cheerfully to Mia. I heard you're not feeling great. I've got the guest room all set up with movies and snacks, and there's chicken soup simmering for dinner. Mia, still in her pajamas and clutching her panda, gave Elena a wan smile. Hi, Elena. Sorry I'm sick for the big party. Don't worry about it. Those fancy parties are boring anyway. We'll have much more fun here. Elena winked at her. I even got those cookies you like, the ones with the rainbow sprinkles. As Elena led Mia upstairs to the guest room, David called after them, Remember, lots of rest and fluids. Yes, Dr. Dad, Elena teased over her shoulder. We'll be fine. Mom will be down in a minute. She's still getting ready. David waited in the living room, now as familiar to him as his own home. In the past 6 months, he'd spent countless evenings here, dinner parties, movie nights, quiet conversations with Victoria over glasses of wine after the girls had gone to bed. He was examining a new photo on the mantel, Elena's graduation from her master's program, with Victoria beaming proudly beside her, when Victoria entered the room. David, she greeted him, and he turned to find her in a midnight blue evening gown that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Her silver-streaked hair was elegantly styled, and a simple diamond pendant adorned her neck. Victoria, he managed, suddenly aware of his rumpled work shirt and the fact that he hadn't had time to pick up his tuxedo from the dry cleaner. You look... wow. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression that few at Horizon ever saw. Thank you. How's Mia feeling? Better. The fever's down, but she's still not 100%. He ran a hand through his hair. I appreciate you letting her stay here, and Elena being willing to look after her. Victoria waved away his thanks. Elena adores Mia. She's already talking about some movie marathon they're planning. She glanced at her watch, a sleek, expensive timepiece that was her one concession to obvious luxury. We should leave in about 45 minutes. Your tuxedo is hanging in the guest bathroom downstairs. I had my assistant pick it up from the dry cleaner this afternoon. David blinked in surprise. You had my tuxedo picked up? I anticipated you might not have time, given Mia's situation. Victoria's expression was matter-of-fact, as if having her assistant run personal errands for him was perfectly normal. There's also a new tie. The old one didn't quite match the initiative's color scheme. This was so typically Victoria, thoughtful and controlling in equal measure, that David had to laugh. Thank you. I'll go change. The tuxedo fit perfectly, as did the new tie, a subtle pattern in blues and greens that matched the Sustainable Innovation Initiative's branding. When David emerged from the bathroom, Victoria gave him an approving nod. Much better. Now you look like a vice president. From upstairs came the sound of Mia's laughter, followed by Elena's voice raised in some dramatic storytelling. David glanced toward the stairs, his parental instinct warring with his professional responsibilities. Victoria followed his gaze. She'll be fine, David. Elena will call us immediately if there's any problem. I know. It's just... He hesitated, trying to find the words. 6 months ago, I was a mid-level manager barely keeping it together as a single dad. Now I'm heading to a corporate gala to present a major initiative to the board and the press, while my daughter is being looked after by the CEO's daughter in the CEO's home. He shook his head in wonder. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed. Victoria's expression softened. Life can change in an instant. Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes for much better. She adjusted his tie slightly, her fingers lingering. That night when you pulled Elena from the car, you weren't thinking about how it might change your life. You were just doing what you felt was right. Anyone would have. Don't. Victoria interrupted gently. Don't say anyone would have done the same. They wouldn't have. I've spent 20 years in business learning to assess people accurately, and I know how rare your kind of integrity is. Her hand moved from his tie to rest lightly on his shoulder. That's why I offered you the position. Not out of gratitude, but because I recognized something in you that Horizon needed. That I needed. There was a weight to her last words that made David's heart beat faster. Before he could respond, Elena appeared at the top of the stairs. Mia's settled in with the princess and the frog and some soup, she reported. Her fever's still down and she promised to rest. She whistled appreciatively at the sight of them. Well, don't you two clean up nice? The board members won't know what hit them. Victoria dropped her hand from David's shoulder, but not before Elena had noticed a knowing smile playing at her lips. We should go. Victoria said, picking up her clutch from the side table. Elena, call us if Mia's fever goes up, if she feels worse, or if anything changes. Elena finished for her mother. I know, Mom, we'll be fine. Go dazzle the investors and save the planet. The drive to the Grand Plaza Hotel where the gala was being held was quiet. David used the time to mentally review his presentation, while Victoria typed rapid responses to last-minute emails on her phone. But there was a comfortable quality to the silence, born of months of working closely together, of learning each other's rhythms and habits. The hotel ballroom had been transformed for the event. Elegant displays showcased the sustainable products that would be the cornerstone of the new initiative. Screens showed animations of David's market strategies, highlighting the untapped customer segments his team had identified. At the entrance, a large banner proclaimed, Horizon Innovations, leading the way to a sustainable future. Impressive, David murmured as they entered. It should be. The budget for this event could fund a small country, Victoria replied dryly, but he could see the pride in her eyes as she surveyed the room. The next hour passed in a whirl of handshakes, introductions, and small talk. Board members, investors, press representatives, all wanted a moment with Victoria Reynolds and her new protege. David found himself explaining his market strategies to a senator, discussing data analytics with the editor of Business Weekly, and accepting congratulations from colleagues who had once barely acknowledged his existence. Throughout it all, he was conscious of Victoria nearby, commanding the room with her usual authority but occasionally glancing his way, as if checking that he was managing, once when a particularly aggressive reporter had cornered him about the real reason for his rapid promotion. Victoria had materialized at his side, her mere presence enough to send the man scurrying away. At 8:30 it was time for the presentations. The ballroom lights dimmed and a spotlight illuminated the stage. The board chairman spoke first, followed by the head of product development. Then it was David's turn. As he took the stage, he saw Victoria in the front row, her expression composed but encouraging. He thought of how far he had come in 6 months, from a mid-level manager with ignored ideas to the architect of Horizon's new market strategy. He thought of Mia, whose life had been enriched by the changes in his career, by the new people who had come into their world. And he thought of the night that had set it all in motion, the rain, the fire, the split-second decision that had altered so many lives. Good evening, he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. 6 months ago, Horizon Innovations set out to redefine what corporate responsibility means in today's market. His presentation went flawlessly. The data was compelling, the strategies clear, the projected outcomes promising. When he finished, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic, not just polite corporate clapping but real appreciation. As he stepped down from the stage, Victoria took his place. Her presentation was the culmination of the evening, tying together the technical innovations, David's market strategies, and the broader vision for Horizon's future. She was masterful as always, her authority tempered now with a passion that had been less visible before Elena's accident. 6 months ago, she said toward the end of her speech, Horizon experienced a moment that changed our corporate direction. It wasn't a market shift or a technological breakthrough. It was a human moment, a reminder that behind every business decision, every strategy, every product, there are people. Real people whose lives we touch, whose futures we help shape. Her gaze found David in the audience. Sometimes it takes a moment of crisis to remind us what truly matters. For Horizon, that moment has led to this initiative. A commitment not just to profit, but to purpose. Not just to success, but to significance. The applause when she finished was thunderous. Board members who had initially been skeptical of the initiative's costs were now nodding in approval. Investors were already gathering in small groups discussing the potential. Press representatives were furiously taking notes. In the midst of the accolades, David's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Elena. Mia's fever is back up, 102, she's asking for you. Without hesitation, David made his way to Victoria, showing her the text. I need to go. She nodded immediately. Of course, take my car, it's faster. I'll find another way home. But the investors, the press interviews, can wait, Victoria finished firmly. Go to Mia. I'll handle things here. The drive back to Victoria's house seemed to take forever, though in reality it was less than 15 minutes. David found Mia in the guest bed, her face flushed with fever. Elena sitting beside her with a cool cloth for her forehead. "Dad?" Mia croaked when she saw him. Reaching out, David sat on the edge of the bed, gathering her into his arms. "I'm here, kiddo. How are you feeling?" "Hot, and my throat hurts." Mia buried her face against his shoulder. "I'm sorry I ruined your big night." "You didn't ruin anything," David assured her, pressing a kiss to her hot forehead. "The important part was already done. And nothing is more important than you." Elena quietly excused herself, promising to make some tea with honey for Mia's throat. Left alone with his daughter, David held her close, rocking slightly as he had when she was smaller. Despite his concern about her illness, there was a sense of rightness in the moment, in the knowledge that when Mia needed him, nothing had kept him from her side. It was past midnight when Victoria returned home. She found David and Mia in the guest room, both asleep. David in a chair pulled up beside the bed, his hand still holding his daughter's. The next morning, Mia's fever had broken. The doctor Victoria insisted on calling confirmed it was just a virus that needed to run its course. By afternoon, Mia was feeling well enough to sit in the sunroom with Elena, looking at a book about marine biology that Elena had bought for her. David found Victoria in her home office, reviewing press coverage of the gala. The headlines were enthusiastic. Horizon leads sustainable revolution. Reynolds' bold vision redefines corporate responsibility. Market innovation meets environmental stewardship. Looks like a success, David commented from the doorway. Victoria looked up, a rare unreserved smile lighting her face. Beyond expectations. The board is thrilled. Investors are calling with new funding offers, and the press coverage couldn't be better. She set down her tablet. "How's Mia?" "Much better. The fever's gone, and she's currently learning more about seahorses than I ever knew existed." "Good. I was worried." Victoria gestured for him to sit. "You know, you did the right thing last night, leaving the gala to be with her." David raised an eyebrow. "Even though I missed the investor meetings and press interviews?" "Even though." Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. 6 months ago, I would have said nothing was more important than those meetings. I would have expected any executive to stay, regardless of personal circumstances. What changed? Victoria was quiet for a moment. When Elena was in that hospital bed, I realized how many moments I'd missed with her over the years. School plays I'd skipped for board meetings. Weekends I'd spent at the office instead of with her. All those choices I made believing they were necessary for success. She met his gaze directly. "Watching you with Mia has been illuminating. You've shown me that it's possible to be both a dedicated parent and a successful professional. That the two aren't mutually exclusive. It's not always easy," David admitted. "Few worthwhile things are." Victoria stood and moved to the window, looking out at the garden where spring flowers were blooming. "David, there's so mething I've been meaning to discuss with you. Something beyond work." David's heart rate quickened. Over the past months there had been moments, shared glances, conversations that lingered late into the evening, a gradual lowering of the professional barriers between them. But neither had taken the step to acknowledge what was developing. "I'm listening," he said quietly. Victoria turned to face him, and for once, the formidable CEO seemed uncertain. "The girls have been hinting, rather heavily, in Elena's case, that they've noticed a change in our relationship. They seem to think we should acknowledge it." Despite his nervousness, David had to smile. "Mia asked me if I like you." A laugh escaped Victoria, a sound that had become more frequent in recent months but was still rare enough to be precious. "That sounds like something Elena would put her up to asking." "Probably." David stood, closing some of the distance between them. "And what did you tell the girls about their observations? That they were being presumptuous and should mind their own business?" Victoria's expression softened. "But they're not wrong, are they?" "Something has changed." David took a deep breath. "When I pulled Elena from that car 6 months ago, I had no idea how it would change my life. I was just doing what seemed right in the moment." He took another step closer. "But everything that's happened since, the job, getting to know you and Elena, watching Mia flourish with new opportunities and relationships, it's been more than I could have imagined." "And us?" Victoria asked softly. This connection that's developed, that's been the most unexpected part. David smiled. The fearsome Victoria Reynolds, the Ice Queen of Horizon. Turns out she's actually quite human under that corporate armor. Victoria rolled her eyes, but her lips curved upward. And the unassuming David Chen turns out to have a spine of steel and ideas that could transform an entire company. Quite a pair we make, David said, now standing directly in front of her. Indeed. Victoria's expression grew serious. I don't enter into relationships lightly, David. My position, my responsibilities, my history with Elena's father, all of it makes me cautious. I understand. And Mia has already been through so much loss. I need to be careful too. He gently took her hand. But sometimes, Victoria, the right risks are worth taking. Her fingers tightened around his. Is that your professional assessment, VP Chen? No, he said softly. That's my personal belief. As a man who once ran toward a burning car because someone needed help, as a father who wants to show his daughter, that fear shouldn't stop you from embracing life. And as someone who has come to care deeply for a brilliant, complicated woman who happens to be his boss. Victoria's free hand came up to rest against his cheek. You make it sound so simple. It probably won't be, David acknowledged, but I think it could be worth it. In the garden below, they could hear Mia's laughter as Elena apparently demonstrated something amusing about seahorse behavior. The sound floated up to them, a reminder of how their lives had already intertwined, how a single moment of crisis had led to connections none of them had expected. Worth it, Victoria repeated thoughtfully. Then, with the decisiveness that had built a corporate empire, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, so unlike the commanding CEO the world knew. But as David's arms went around her, drawing her closer, it deepened into something sure and certain. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was smiling, not her corporate smile or even her polite social smile, but something real and a little bit wondering. Well, she said, slightly breathless, I believe that settles the matter. From the doorway came a dramatic gasp, followed by a delighted giggle. They turned to find Elena and Mia standing there. Elena with a triumphant grin, Mia with wide, excited eyes. I knew it. Elena crowed. Didn't I tell you, Mia? Didn't I say they were totally falling for each other? Elena, Victoria began, her tone warning, but there was no real reproof in it. Mia bounced on her toes, apparently fully recovered from her illness. Does this mean we're going to be like a family? All of us together? The question hung in the air, simple but profound. David looked at Victoria, seeing in her eyes the same mix of hope and caution he felt himself. We're already becoming a family, kiddo, he said finally, his arm still around Victoria's waist. It just took a while for the grown-ups to catch up to what you and Elena already figured out. 6 months ago, on a rainy night, David Chen had made a split-second decision that changed many lives, not least his own. He had run toward danger instead of away from it, had chosen action over caution, and somehow that one moment of courage had led here, to new opportunities, new connections, and the beginning of a new family formed, not by blood but by choice and circumstance. As Elena and Mia celebrated their matchmaking success, and Victoria's hand found his again, David thought that sometimes the greatest risks led to the greatest rewards, and sometimes a single act of courage could be the first step on a journey you never expected to take.